Let's imagine something together. It is the year 30 CE. Jesus has just completed his mission. His disciples are still in Jerusalem. They are praying together, trying to understand everything that just happened. The movement that will later be called Christianity is still very small, and it does not yet look like the global religion we know today. It looks something else entirely. It looks Jewish. The earliest followers of Jesus were not starting a new religion. They were Jews. They prayed in Jewish synagogues. They followed the law of Moses. They observed the Sabbath. They kept dietary laws. And they believed something very specific. They believed that Jesus was the Messiah sent by God, not God himself, not a divine being equal to God, but the promised Messiah, a chosen servant of God. Now let's look at the earliest historical record we have, the book of Acts. In Acts, we see the disciples preaching in Jerusalem. What message are they preaching? Peter stands before the crowd and says something very important. Jesus of Nazareth was a man approved by God among you by miracles and wonders and signs which God did through him. Notice the language. A man approved by God. God working through him. This language is very clear. God is the source of power. Jesus is the messenger, the servant, the Messiah. Now look at another statement in Acts. Peter says, "The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has glorified his servant Jesus." Again, we see the same pattern. God above, Jesus as the servant of God. This is how the earliest believers understood him. They believed in one God, the same God worshipped by Abraham and Moses. And they believed Jesus was the Messiah sent by that God. Now something else is very important. The earliest Christians continued to follow Jewish law. In Acts chapter 3 and Acts chapter 5, the disciples are still praying in the temple. They have not left Judaism. They see themselves as part of it. In fact, for the first years of the movement, the followers of Jesus were simply another group within Judaism. They were Jews who believed the Messiah had come. Now this is where something very interesting happens. A new figure enters the story, a man named Paul. Paul was not one of the original disciples. He never met Jesus during his lifetime, but he later became one of the most influential missionaries in early Christianity, and Paul had a very different mission. While the original disciples focused mainly on Jewish communities, Paul focused on Gentiles, non-Jews. This created a huge question. Should Gentile converts follow Jewish law? Should they keep the Sabbath? Should they follow dietary laws? Should they be circumcised? Paul argued that Gentiles did not need to follow the full Jewish law. This was a major turning point, because it slowly separated the Jesus movement from its Jewish roots. Now let's pause here. Before Paul's mission expanded Christianity into the Roman world, the movement looked very different. It was centered in Jerusalem, led by the disciples, and deeply connected to Jewish monotheism. Jesus was honored as the Messiah. But worship remained directed to the one God of Israel. Over time, as Christianity spread across the Greek and Roman world, new philosophical ideas entered the discussion. Greek philosophy had concepts about divine nature, essence, and metaphysics. These ideas slowly influenced theological debates. Questions began to change. Instead of asking, "Is Jesus the Messiah?" people began asking, "What is the nature of Christ? Is he divine? Is he eternal? How does he relate to God?" These debates continued for centuries. Eventually, they led to the famous Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. That is where the doctrine of the Trinity began to take formal shape. But if we go back before those debates, before Greek philosophical influence, before church councils, the earliest followers of Jesus believed something much simpler. They believed in one God, and they believed Jesus was the Messiah sent by that God. Now, this historical perspective raises an important question. Did the teachings about Jesus change over time as Christianity spread into new cultures? Or were later doctrines simply deeper explanations of what was always believed? Different historians answer this question in different ways, but one thing is clear. The earliest form of the Jesus movement looked very different from later Christianity. It was Jewish. It was centered on monotheism. and it focused on Jesus as the Messiah and servant of God. Understanding this early stage of history helps us see how religious ideas develop over time, and it reminds us that theology often grows through debate, discussion, and interpretation. Now I want to leave you with a question. If you were living in Jerusalem in the first century, listening to the disciples preach, what would Christianity have looked like to you?